Nope. Hey guys, what is up? How are you all doing? It's been so long since I have filmed a sit-down video, like we're talking weeks. But here we are. So a few days ago, we got some news. I was actually sitting down watching something on Amazon, and then I see this thing like popped up on my phone, and it was a notification saying that Frozen had announced its closure. And I read it and my heart honestly dropped. Like it just hurt, because Frozen for me is my favorite of the Disney Broadway musicals. Frozen for me is by no means my favorite movie of the Disney movies, but for me it was my favorite of the Disney Broadway musicals that I had seen. I've seen Aladdin, Lion King, and Frozen. And for me, Frozen was just pure Broadway. Like, I thought the sets were fantastic, the costumes were beautiful, the lighting, the score was fantastic, and for me, I also thought it was the most mature of the musicals. Coming from Ireland, where there's a massive pantomime scene, I always felt that when I saw Aladdin, and I saw it twice, once in New York and once in London, I always felt that it kind of was borderline panto, but I was also used to seeing pantomimes. And, you know, productions do Aladdin, so I just could never really shake off the whole pantomime vibe. And then with the Lion King, yes, again, I saw it twice. I saw it once in New York and once in London. I actually preferred the New York production to the London production. But I just felt after the first, after the Circle of Life, it all kind of went meh for me. But that's just my own personal taste. Some people love it. I'm not crazy about it, but I'd see the shows again. So when they announced that Frozen was to close, I honestly was upset, because I love that show so much. I saw it 3 times in New York, and I just thought it was a phenomenal show. So after that happened, a lot of people were like, well, why did Frozen announce its closing? Did I say Frozen? Why did Frozen announce its closing? And people were curious. Now, I did a little bit of research. I didn't have to do that much because it's actually very easy to find. But when Disney announced that they were going to close Frozen, they stated that... Okay, let's backtrack a little bit. Let's go back a little bit further. The grosses for Frozen were always good. So the grosses, the money the show was making, it was always good. But they were never consistent. In comparison to The Lion King, in comparison to Aladdin, it just wasn't consistent. And even if you looked at the grosses for Frozen and compared it to other shows around New York, it was in the top maybe 10 or maybe 5 at times in like the best performance of the shows. But it never really was that good. And I don't know why Frozen didn't take off. I really don't. Because for me, Frozen was that kind of show that it was never about pleasing the Broadway community. It was one of those shows where it was, they cast the net a lot further. They were looking at bringing in families and all that kind of jazz. So for me, the show offered everything that I thought that maybe your typical Broadway goer would not be looking for. I'm not saying by any means that it wasn't. Listen, bottom line, Frozen the musical is not high class theatre. It wasn't. But I thought it was a very solid show. So overall, the show never did overly good in the box office. That was kind of first thing that never really took off the show, and I don't know why that happened. Secondly, and this is a bit controversial, I think that Disney on Broadway maybe bit off a little more than they could chew when they decided to have 3 Broadway Disney shows. Now, if the audience is there, the audience is there. So obviously, Disney Theatricals did their research. They figured they could have a 3rd Broadway production, Broadway musical. But I just think that it was one too many, personally. Interestingly, Disney Theatricals doesn't receive a corporate subsidy from their company. Their shows need to be self-sustaining. So what that means is if a show, for example, isn't doing too well, if Disney Theatricals if they're underperforming, if their shows are underperforming, they will not get money from the Walt Disney Company to keep it afloat. Their shows have to be standalone, self-sustaining. So, when Frozen, unfortunately, when the grosses were not fantastic for the last several months, at times they were not making enough money, and obviously this created a deeper hole for them to get out of. Interestingly, I actually have to do a bit of research. I'm actually going to have it here because I actually wrote down. I have my notes in front of me. I had to look back at all the different Disney productions that were on Broadway, and I was very curious to see how long they ran for. Tarzan ran for 35 previews, 486 performances. The Little Mermaid ran for 50 previews, 685 performances. Frozen ran for 26 previews, 825 performances. And interestingly, I did not know this, Newsies ran for 1,004 performances. But the most important thing is it recouped its $5 million investment in 7 months. I did not know that Newsies actually will have outrun Frozen by time it has closed, but Newsies has outrun Frozen. Mary Poppins ran for 2,619 performances. So when you put it all back together, why did Frozen the musical close on Broadway? Because they were very clear that they had still future plans for the Frozen production in other incarnations, being the national tour that's still going to run, the West End production that's going to open in Drury Lane. It's probably been pushed back with everything that's going on. And there's other international productions also. Why did Frozen the musical close? A number of reasons, which I've already stated, but I still think that Disney Theatricals shutting down Frozen right now was the best decision for the longevity of Disney Theatricals. Because they have their top earners, which is Lion King and Aladdin, but Frozen for them wasn't making the money they needed. Therefore, by cutting off that production, therefore losing all those particular costs, they are sustaining the other 2 productions, which are going to run longer in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, they sat down and were like, we've got 3 productions in New York right now. One of them has to get the chop. Also, I kind of think that Disney Theatricals made a good decision in which show to close, because Aladdin's already had its run in London and it's got other productions around the world. The Lion King has been running for 1,000 years. With shutting of Frozen, they could technically use those sets and costumes and bring them abroad to other international productions, therefore decreasing the cost to start up a whole other production in another place. So the bottom line with this is that Frozen closed because it just wasn't doing well in the box office. And on top of that, they had to make a decision as to what they're going to do for the longevity of Disney Theatricals, Disney on Broadway. And the smartest move was, unfortunately, to shut Frozen. Now, Frozen, honestly, I think was inevitably going to close in the next year or so. I don't think it had much left in it to keep going beyond that. There was always rumours and speculation the show was going to close in the next couple of months, maybe after the summer. So I think they really just bit the bullet and said, right, let's close this production. I do really feel for, obviously, every single person that works on the show. There's so many cast, crew, behind the scenes. There's many people who unfortunately are now out of a job. I totally feel for them and empathise with them, and it's a horrible situation, especially for the new cast who had just come into the show pretty recently, and then when the show shut, they did not realise that was actually the last performance, and now the show is gone. So it is sad, but I think in the grand scheme of things, I'm looking at the positives in this situation, where the grand scheme of things is that they are trying to make sure that when all this pandemic passes, that they are still going to have productions that can run on Broadway and still entertain thousands for years to come. Anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed the video there. Kind of did a little bit of a rundown of what's going on with Broadway and the Broadway community right now, and it's a really difficult time for the Broadway community. It's a difficult time for everyone, but for me, with where my heart is in theatre and Broadway, it's hard to see what could potentially happen to Broadway when all this does pass, because unfortunately Broadway is probably just going to be a shell of what it used to be. But Broadway will bounce back, it just unfortunately will take a while to do that. Anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.